Maria Dong, welcome to the It's Storytime with Wil Wheaton author conversation, which needs a much better, pithier title. I'm really, really grateful that you made some time for me and for the audience today. Thanks for being here.
Thank you so much for inviting me. This is so exciting. My life is very boring, so this is very, very exciting.
Outstanding. Lean into this, but pace yourself.
Yeah.
I wanted I want be so I have these questions that I ask all of our authors, mostly because I'm trying to learn how to be a better writer, and
Okay.
and and I'm learning so much from you and your colleagues in the art. I wanted to speak specifically about the weight of Han and the
Okay.
concept of Han. Um, that that really your story came to me at a moment when I was just drowning in grief. It's been a brutal few months for me and my family. We lost a beloved friend, then we lost 2 pets that had been with us
Oh,
for 14 and 17 years respectively within 3 weeks of each other. It's just been really hard. I carry a lot of grief because of the abuse I suffered as a child and my efforts to just sort of heal that and recover from it. But I'm aware that I carry a lot of grief with me all the time. I'm sad even when I'm happy. And reading about Han is the first time I've been introduced to that concept.
mm,
When you're when when you're working on this, I can grief comes through the page to me, and it's the
yeah.
grief of your characters. Um, and I just wondered when you are doing this, when you're working on this, do you feel that while you're writing it, or are you able to have a remove? And would you tell me a little bit about your history with the concept of Han? Go.
Okay. Well, I will say, first of all, for this story, I wrote it in two halves. Like, I wrote a
Mhm.
version of it when I first wanted to be a writer, right? Probably
Okay.
like 15 years ago. And I sent it to a bunch of magazines that all very politely declined. This was back when some of them I had to send like in an envelope with a stamp.
Of
Uh,
course. Yeah, I remember that.
yes. And, and then I shelved it. I shelved it probably for, I don't know, 10 years, maybe longer than that. And I had a period of time right after my second book died on submission with my agent where I like wasn't ready to dive into a new project yet, like a book length project. And I just started
Mhm,
writing short story after short story after short story. And I think
mhm,
I was going through a lot of transitions myself at that period. For starters, I used to be an occupational therapist, and then I got COVID in the
mhm.
first week COVID was in Michigan, and I was really,
Oh
really
god.
sick for like a
That must
year.
have been
Yeah, and
terrifying.
it was because nobody knew what was happening. I remember at one
Yeah.
point I went to the hospital and the doctor was like afraid to come into the room. So they put the equipment on the bed and then they left and then they let me
Oh
into the
my
room and I
god.
had to put the equipment on myself. Like there was
Oh my
like a
god.
intercom and they were telling me what to do. So
Yeah.
it was really scary. And I was also extremely burnt out because I had just kind of like done grad school and my clinicals and I took my exam and I
Mhm.
also like while I was studying for my boards was, like, writing books kind of, like, as a last almost, like, trying to say goodbye to it, like, I knew this was gonna be my new career, and I had to be grown up, and I wasn't gonna dally with these childish things anymore, so I wrote this, like, one last book, and I actually entered it into Pitch Wars, which was a contest for, like, 10 years, and then I kinda, like, wrote it off and started my first occupational therapy job at that point, and then, like, maybe 2 months into the job, found out I actually got into Pitch Wars, and I was kind of shocked because I kind of, like that had been my last, like, "Well, I'm gonna do this, and when it doesn't work out, then I'm gonna be all done with this," which I've told myself before, but, I was gonna stick with it because, I was married at that point, so I had someone that was, like, depending on me, and,
Yeah.
I had just finished grad school, so I'd invested all of this time and this effort and this money, and the truth is, like, I think I was also extremely burnt out, I didn't realize it, and then I went through, like, 2 years of working in nursing homes and in hospitals, just getting more and more burnt out by the healthcare system, and so then when I got
Mhm.
COVID, it was, like, this really terrible thing, but it also turned out to be this, like, weird blessing in disguise because probably spent, like, 2 months just, like, laying on my we have, like, a little deck that we built when we first moved into this house, in a
Mhm.
bathrobe, just, like, staring at
Mhm.
the trees and, like, trying to understand, like, what is my life now because I can't be an OT anymore, and, like, what am I gonna do? And so I think, like, I was writing that story during a period of like intense change and a lot of grief. And as a Korean person, and then as a mixed race Korean person, I think I have a lot of feelings about um, like legacy, ancestry,
Mhm.
family, like a lot of these things get tied together. And the concept of Han, I think, encapsulates a lot of that so beautifully. There are actually scholars in Korea that talk about second and third generation Han, like the idea that Koreans in the diaspora who have to leave, most Koreans that for a while there were leaving Korea were not leaving of their own volition, right? Either like
Okay.
they were being transported out as slaves for the Japanese, or, there were
Right.
periods of time where like financially, things were really bad, and so people are setting out to find better opportunities. And then there was the Korean War. So we have a lot of like these really giant cultural movers that are like moving Koreans away from Korea. We have one of the biggest, most spread out diaspora populations of a country our size. And so there are a lot of Koreans who are like second or third generation immigrants into other countries that have this like very complicated feeling about their history and how they got to where they are. And so there are these like scholars who are kind of combining together anthropological concepts and folk concepts and like psychology. They've come up with this idea of like second or third generation Han, this grief feeling that gets passed in your bloodline. It kind of like moves and it's presenting in different ways in different
Yeah.
levels. Yeah.
Yes, yeah, I'm reading about this. I've actually just recently become aware of, do they call it epigenetics in
Yeah.
Western culture? Is that right? The idea that
Well,
your great-great-grandparents' trauma affected the DNA of your great-grandparents and your
yeah.
grandparents and your mother and you. Yeah, it is fascinating to me,
Yeah. Yeah.
that you can carry generational grief and weight before you are even born.
Yeah. Yeah. No, we have back into the healthcare side of it. We have so much evidence for that, right?
Mhm.
Including like the trauma and grief that, like, even while you're in utero, that a mother might experience, or a person with a uterus might experience, can
Yeah,
can change the genetics of the child contained. So even on that
yeah.
micro level, you're having those changes, and you can extrapolate that. Anyway, yes, exactly. So it's interesting because that's a scientific concept, but it actually kind of validates this like folk anthropological, like,
Yeah,
social concept.
I was going to ask. So Han exists in Korean culture
Yeah.
long before this field of study exists, right? So like
Yes.
3 centuries ago,
Yes.
Koreans are experiencing this.
Yeah.
And as a Korean, you're tapped into that. Of course you are. It's in your blood, right?
Well, I mean, I have like I have complicated feelings about it because I'm a Korean, but I was born here and I was raised
Uh-huh.
by, well, my mom is like from Korea. So like on one hand, I
Mhm.
have this influence there, but she was also very, very secretive about like how she was raised and her life. And so I've
Oh,
almost kind of had to
interesting.
like, yeah, tease her apart almost like a puzzle, right? Like it's almost like
Yeah.
this mystery that like over the course of my life, I've gone and gathered evidence and compared that against this person that I see, and kind of, oh, okay, that comes from this, or this might be from here, that kind
Mhm.
of thing. So yeah, I think I have like, I think, people are very complicated and you can hold multiple viewpoints at the same time. I
Mhm.
feel that in my Koreanness, but I also like as a
Mhm.
westernized American person, do I believe in Han? Yes, no, both, art. I don't know, like, so
I'm the whitest white guy on this planet, and when I read your story, I was like, "I feel this in my
yeah,
way," right? It's different, like, in all of my privilege and all of that,
yeah,
I still feel like I was othered and
yeah,
and I was bullied
yeah,
I have felt, "Well, I didn't ask for any of this. Why are you mad at me about it?" And
yeah.
and the kind of cruelty that sort of comes with that. Have you been contacted by anyone who's read this and has felt a need to reach out to you and, like, talk about it?
Yeah. So this is so funny because this was like my story that like I wouldn't give up on. I tried to sell
Uh-huh.
it to like everywhere, right? By the time I sold it, I had sold a lot, right? I had this period of time where I wrote like story after story after story, and then I started selling them like immediately, and that was very cool, right? Um,
Congratulations, that's awesome,
yeah, but
and
I couldn't.
hard to do.
I could not sell this one. Everywhere turned it down, and then I
Yeah,
wound up sending it to Choreo, and it was their very first issue, which a new magazine is very dicey. You have to be very careful
yeah.
sending stuff to new magazines because you don't know, do they understand the legalities of, copyright? Are they going to be able to promote the story? Are they actually going to pay
Mhm,
you?
mhm.
So it was a brand new magazine, but I really liked the masthead. I really liked what they were saying about fiction. I thought, you know what, I'm going to try it. And this story has been like the little story that could, right? Like I still get people reaching out to me about it. It's been done in audio a few times now. I mean, it was in the Best American, like probably
Yeah,
half of the
man.
accolades.
I was I was gonna get there. I cannot. It's so cool that you're a Best American. For everyone listening, 2022, right?
Well, actually,
That's
2
the year
years
that
in a
you're in it?
row. So, yeah, I was
I didn't
2022, and then I
realize that.
think 23 or 21. It was whatever the other, yeah. So,
Wow. That's
yeah.
awesome. I'm so happy for you. That's just so
It was
cool. I
cool.
I'm thinking about this girl who is so obvious. Like, you're so clearly a storyteller. Like, I can just how long have I been talking to you? 13 minutes, and I'm like, "Oh, I'm speaking to a storyteller." Like, I get it. It just comes off of you through the screen. I'm so sad for this girl who's like, "I guess I'm not gonna do this." How'd you come back?
Right.
What piece of this, what part of her who was like, "No, I got stories to tell." How did she reach you?
I think I actually I tell people a lot, if you can do something else, you should, right? Like I don't
Get that?
really,
Yeah.
yeah, I don't really think I mean, and I haven't in quite some time. So I had a daughter 2 years ago, and it's
Mhm.
been pretty busy. So I was kind of like
Yeah.
on hiatus for a while, although that's like picking way up, which is very exciting. We just sold a 2-book deal that's a secret on top of a book that's coming out next year. So that'll be like,
That's awesome.
yeah,
Way
and
to
that book
go,
actually,
man.
yeah.
Congratulations.
We shelved that book. We decided not to go out with it at the time, which is
Yeah.
so funny. So it's been sitting on the shelf for like 5 years, and now suddenly it's like gonna be a series, I guess. So, um,
Wow. That's
yeah, but
great.
I feel like, I mean, so I come from a pretty humble financial background.
Mhm.
And, when I got out of grad school, I had a lot of student loans, and I
Mhm.
was still struggling. I think like a lot of people that come from a humble financial background think, oh, well, if I go to grad school and I get like a fancy degree and a fancy job, like, you know, my whole life is going to be different and perfect. It's like winning the lottery, right? And it turns
Yeah.
out, like, to a certain extent, yes, but then you have all of these like deferred expenses that you have not kept up with, like your health,
Yeah.
right? Like I had like surgeries that I had deferred for years because I didn't have the money to do anything, or like, so yeah, I just initially I was still, being like very, it was very financially difficult, and then also I was not, I didn't realize I had ADHD, and I don't think I realized how rough it was going to be for me in a healthcare setting, like in terms of, I was in outpatient therapy, and so you have to be able to account for every single minute of your time. And
Mhm.
so at first I did like amazingly, right? Like, and I think it's a very common ADHD pattern. When you pick up something new, you're like really good at it, and people are like so impressed, but you burn out very quickly. And so
Mhm.
within like a year, I was starting to like, I was probably pretty suicidal, like at that point. Like I was starting to think about
Oh.
like, well, maybe if I just, I know I'm not like joking about it, but I think that my brain is kind of a dark place, like, and I don't perceive it that way. But then, like, sometimes I talk
Mhm.
to somebody else and they're like, that's super dark. And I'm like, oh, okay, good to know. Like, thank you. Like, this book, this is my debut. When the editor that purchased it asked me where I thought it sat on the shelf, I was like, oh, I think it's like a cozy mystery. And she was like, yeah, this is like a really harrowing thriller. So I was like, oh, you
Isn't
know,
it interesting the way we perceive ourselves versus the way others perceive us, and
oh my God.
the ways we understand our work and the
Yeah.
ways other people understand them? I So many times I've thought I was talking about this, and then sometime later, through a couple of pieces of feedback and looking back on it with, like, kind of a different set of eyes, I realize, "Oh my god, I wasn't telling that at all. I was actually talking about," and it almost always comes down to, "Oh, it's another story about loneliness, grief, and betrayal." Like, because those are the huge kind of things, in my life. In when I was reflecting on your story, immediately after narrating it, it landed on me really hard that this man just wants to make an orange, right? He's just like, "I love oranges. I love the memory of an orange, and I love what this means for me." But he ends up making grief, right? Because that's where he is. And I thought that that was incredibly metaphorical and symbolic for all of us. Like, well, look, all I wanted to do is make an orange, but I made this, he made a machine that makes people sad. Um, uh, Would you talk through a little bit, I'm curious if you feel comfortable sharing, the creative process and the story design process. Where did you start with this? And, like, w as you were working your way through telling the story, um, uh, did you ever did you ever find yourself in any wild detours that you had to really pull back from? Or was this like, "No, I got this. I really know where
No.
I'm
So,
driving at."
like I said, I wrote a version of it probably 15 years ago that had a
Mhm.
pandemic in it before the this was before the pandemic, right? So, like, and this idea that
Man. Yeah.
yeah, machines could, like, cause the replication of a virus because it's kind of this invisible thing, and it's very, like, I don't know, Michael Crichton-y, right, this idea. Like, obviously, I read
Okay.
quite a bit of Michael Crichton as a kid, and,
Yeah.
I couldn't sell it, and then I shelved it, and then when I came back to it 15 years later, I had learned a lot about writing. So this is I'm gonna give you some of my ideas on writing here now. The first thing
Thank
is, like, you
you.
you have to be honest in some way, right? So, like, what you were just saying about how, like, you think you're writing about one thing and it turns out you're writing about something else, right? If you write honestly, you will wind up putting parts of yourself or, someone into that work because that's it's the truth. And that's what makes it resonate with you is like when you're reading it back later, if you can find some truth in it, even if it's not a conscious truth, it's just something that resonates on the right level with you. This is how this thing
Mhm.
actually feels. Then it's going to hit the reader like a different way. So I think like a lot of times for me, the process of writing a short story, which I don't do a ton of short fiction anymore because I have very little time. So if I have any writing to do, I write long fiction because that's what pays the bills, right? So
Yeah.
with a short story, a lot of times it's like there's the thing that you think the story is about, and a lot of times that's kind of like the plot of the story. And there's basically
Mhm.
like a three-part, your setup, your action, and then your like punch at the end, right? So there's like a three-part plot, but then the story is actually about something else on a different
Mhm.
level, and you have to be able to kind of work between those levels. And the more like levels that you can stack on there and connect together, the more things kind of resonate. And also a lot of times, like, really weird and interesting connections will emerge that will also kind of cause things to stick in the reader's mind and make them feel something, right? So, like, that the story about the orange, which actually comes from I wanna say my college freshman Spanish class. We did a thing on Neruda, and my professor
Mhm.
was just absolutely obsessed with the Neruda poem about, the half orange, which in Spanish is this concept of your soulmate, right? A media de
Mhm.
rapas. So, like, I it just, like, stuck with me forever and ever and ever, right? And so, like, when eventually I started putting layers on this story, like, I have, like, the frame of it, and I start layering on it and layering on it and layering on it, I'm starting to, like, weave together these 2 different levels. Here's the plot of the story, here's, like, the emotional heart of the story where it's a story about grief, but also connection and the way those 2 things are
Mhm.
kind of very intricately entwined. It's a story about
Mhm.
isolation and the way that people's movements kind of take us either together and apart, right? It's about
Mhm.
like saviors kind of because like there's this one character who thinks that she's gonna like she's the one that's gonna fix everything and she's like doing all this weird stuff, but actually like how effective or helpful is that, right? It's a story about like government systems and big systems and how what happens when they fail us. So I have all these different and I don't think everyone should write stories like this. I don't really have a choice because I have ADHD and that's how my brain works. I'm like this thing, this
Yeah.
thing, and
Your
glue them all
brain goes,
together.
"Shiny, shiny, shiny,
Yeah.
shiny," right? Yeah.
Yes, yes, and
Yeah,
a
yeah,
lot of
yeah.
times, if you read the Goodreads reviews of my books, you either have people that are like, "There's way too much shit in this book," or "There's a
Yeah.
lot of shit in this," either positive or negative, so,
Of
yeah.
course.
I feel like my debut particularly is like an ADHD litmus test. I've had so many
Yeah.
people write to me later and say like, "I read your book, and then I saw an interview that you gave about ADHD, and then I went and got tested, turns out I have ADHD," and I'm just like, "I guess I'm doing a service there," but yeah, so, like, yeah, I don't know where I was going with this. Emotional honesty, the different layers. I think grief kind of emerged just because that's where I was. And I think
Yeah.
a lot of times as you age, like you start getting very contemplative about your grief as well, right? Because you have like a little space sometimes to be able to work through it and see it with a different lens. And I think that I've become a better writer as I've aged, partially because of practice, but just also because of being able to have that perspective, right? Like I do have a child now, and it's amazing because the way that she experiences the world is so immediate, right? And it's
Yeah.
very black or white, and everything is exactly as it is, and everything in the
And
present
she's
is the
kind
way
of
it's.
like she's the main character in her world.
Oh my God,
So
she's
everything my kids are grown now, but I have friends who have little ones,
yeah.
and I'm watching them remembering, gosh, it's been 30 years since I was around a kid who was like, "The entire world exists to about the ends of my fingertips." And, like, I'm just that's what it is for me right now, and as adults, we have to, like, kinda meet them where they are, right?
Yes,
It's like
right?
such a it's such a challenge, but That's a great reminder that when we make the effort to see things through the eyes of our kids, we can get rid of, like, everything that culture has implanted in us and
Yeah.
just sort of see the truth of things, right?
It starts early though, like, she's already starting to do certain things that like, like, I was surprised even though having that occupational therapy background on an intellectual level, I knew this was gonna happen. Like, one day,
Yeah.
just recently, she came to me and said, "My favorite color is pink," and she's obsessed with pink, she's obsessed with unicorns and girly things, and, like, my husband and I are both bis, MB, like, we're not very gender role normative, and so, like,
Yeah.
she obviously didn't get this from me. I'm here in a black t-shirt, right? So, but
Right.
she lives in a culture and she's picking up signals from that culture. And so, I
Yeah.
just it's crazy how early that process starts. The other day I said someone was a girl and she said, "No, they're a boy." And I was just like, all right, I guess we're gonna have to start having conversations about this, because like
I
it's
know.
time. Yeah.
It is just we could talk for the rest of this time we have
Oh, I know.
together about how amazing and weird it is to be a parent and how
Yes.
wonderful and bizarre things happen with our kids. I wanted to ask you some questions specifically
Yes.
about your writing process.
Okay. Yeah.
Um, um, I think that writing exists. You can agree or disagree with this. I believe that the writing process exists on a spectrum between carefully plotted and outlined and completely pantsed. And that we're
Hmm.
kind of and like I move back and forth through that. For the longest time as a writer, I thought I have to discover it as I'm going, and if I don't get it in the first draft, then like I don't know why I even bothered trying to write this in the first place. I have since learned that it's fine to put down 10 things, keep 3 of them,
Yeah.
and build it out into a story. What is your process, and how did you arrive at the process that works for you?
Well, I want to start by saying I've probably written at this point 25 full length books. So
Mhm,
that process has evolved a lot over time, like in
mhm.
practice. And I also think it's different when you are writing for yourself versus when you're like a working writer who has a deadline and
Yeah,
things they must turn in. Like, this book deal I have is a 2 book deal. So at some point they're going to ask me for an outline of the second book and I must produce some sort of outline, right? Like,
right.
that is how a 2 book deal normally works. Sometimes you can just pants the second book real fast and then like retroactively make an outline out of it. I've done that before. I
Yeah,
don't recommend that
yeah,
because then it's very stressful, but, yeah, so I think it depends. I think a lot of times with the first draft, I think I know what the book is about sometimes. Sometimes I have no idea, but I'm
mhm.
looking for again that second level, right? So like I'm going to talk about this book right here for a second. This is my debut.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
it is a psychological thriller about mental illness, and also like loneliness and isolation, just by the way, and grief. Uh, so uh, I too have themes.
Sounds like it's kind of in my wheelhouse, now that you
Maybe.
mention it.
It depends on if you like the feeling that you don't know what is real, which is, I think, a pretty consistent theme through the first 3 of my books that have been
Man, that
published.
sounds scary as fuck to me.
Yeah, yeah, me too, right? I'll go down that rabbit hole in just a second.
Okay.
But this book, so we go on a submission with the book that I got me my agent, which is a Joseon Dynasty Korean fantasy novel, and this was before the big Asian fantasy like shift we had. So like it was
Mhm.
kind of a weird book at the time, and publishers were kind of like, we already have like an Asian author, I don't know, and so that died
Oh,
on
right,
submission.
yeah, we already checked that box.
Yeah,
Ugh.
and there's also a
Yeah,
pandemic in the book where that turns people into zombies, and
yeah,
like this was before Kingdom, right? Because like Kingdom
yeah,
happened, and I was like, damn it, okay, that ship has sailed, but like, then the pandemic happened in the middle of being on submission with that book, and so then all
yeah,
publishers were like, we're not really doing pandemic books right now." So then I write this next
sure.
book, which is a science fiction conspiracy thriller in space. Again, what's real? Hard to say. The person's, like, slowly going insane because of this disease, and, that book also dies on submission. Science fiction dies fast, which is, I guess, good and bad, right? Science fiction has a very small market compared to fantasy, so if you write fantasy, there are a lot of publishers that aren't really fantasy publishers that you can maybe, like, edge your way into, or
Okay.
there are like some like small publishers in like Britain and stuff like that that are still well respected. Science fiction's a much smaller, tighter market, and so like a lot of times when you die with sci-fi, you die pretty fast. So that book dies really fast. Funny side note about that book: in the first draft, there's a villain in that book, and it was Elon Musk. And then this was before Elon Musk turned into Elon Musk, right? And so like I'm
Have you
predicting the future
considered
here.
that perhaps you're able to predict the future
I know.
like, I
It's
mean,
always
I'm
bad.
wondering, like, hey, have you written anything about like a despotic, tyrannical, horrific leader of a country like, we'll say America, like suddenly dying? Have you written something about that? Would you?
No, but it sounds fun. I think
Okay,
I could
great.
find some weird places to take that.
Okay,
Um,
great. The sooner
so
you could do that so we could get reality to follow, I would just listen. I'll commission that.
yeah. Okay. I'll think about it. So then I write Charmed, but like everyone's an old aunt Asian person. So like it's
Okay.
like the TV show Charmed, but like
Yeah,
if
yeah.
everyone was Asian and old and also it happened in a nursing home. And we're about to go on submission
So
with
it's like
this.
Charmed, but with the aunties?
Yes, they're
Is
all
that
aunties. Yeah.
I
Um
love that.
yeah, well, we just sold it. So like maybe I
Oh,
wasn't
that's
supposed to say
great.
that, but yeah, so um
You, I would encourage you, to get that into the hands of, oh my God, her name, fuck, I'm for blanking on my friend's name. Never mind. We're gonna cut this part out of Will having a senior moment. When
it's
the
okay.
when a friend's name leaves my head, it's the most embarrassing thing.
No, it happens to me
Continue. I'm sorry
constantly.
that I interrupted you.
Yeah, but we didn't go on sub with it at that time because we had just
Mhm,
gone out with a fantasy and a science fiction book, and it's like there's only 6 imprints essentially in the United States that do fantasy and science fiction as their like main wheelhouse. And so she was like,
mhm,
"We will be sending it to the exact same people. Do you have an idea for another book?" And so I was like, "No, I don't." But then 2 days later, I was like, "Well, I have this image of a person jumping off a bridge, and I have nothing else from there."
mhm.
So then I'm like, what do you think about a twisty mystery? And my agent's like, I think that's great. We should do that. So I'm like, okay. So now I'm really mad. And I've also put in a lot of effort on 2 books that like didn't go anywhere at that time, or 3 books at that point. Oh, and there was another book in there too that's like a lesbian old ladies like milliner and hat
Oh my
maker
God. You're speaking my
suffrage
language.
book.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, they're trying to like basically they have to do like a heist. Anyway, it's not that book's coming out next year. Um, so yeah, so there was like a bunch of books, none of them sell. We're just like everything sucks, right? And so I'm like really, really mad. And at this point, I had just lost my job as an OT because I was sick. And so I'm like
Mhm,
laying on my back deck and I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna write this mystery book. So I Google like how to write a mystery. Now and this is before AI, so there were actual resources there. And
boy, I miss those days.
I know, right? And I read like 4 books on like how to write a mystery, how to plot a mystery, which is like, I don't know. So I sit down, I'm like, I'm gonna write the world's most twisty, like serious, real psychological, hard hitting thriller mystery book. So I sit down, I start
Yeah.
writing this book. And I get like 60,000 words through just like pantsing this thing. And I get to this scene where the main character falls into a dumpster and it's like really funny and kind of slapstick. And I'm like, oh shit. I think this is like the actual book. I think this scene is like what the book is supposed
Oh,
to be like the tone, the character, everything. And like a day before that, I had written this like 2,000 word like noodlette that was like loosely connected to the story, but I didn't know how about like her basically like Narnia-ing, like she fantasizes like a kitchen door and she walks through it and she's in like a little kid's world. And I was like, I
does
think
she
this is
dumpster
also the
into
book.
Narnia? Is there like a dumpster Narnia?
No, they're 2 separate.
I
They're 2
love
separate
that
scenes.
idea.
No, they're
Oh,
2 I
okay,
know.
okay, okay,
I'm sorry. They are 2 separate scenes. Although
okay.
that's like way better than what I did. And I'm like, man, I should have done Dumpster Narnia. That's you could
I'm
have
just
actually
saying,
called the book Dumpster Narnia. That's such a great
I
title.
mean, what if the reality we're living in is the dumpster Narnia? We just
It
don't
is.
realize it.
I agree. I'm like there. I'm like, yeah. So I'm like, shit. So I sit down and I have to start this book over, right? Like I throw
Mhm,
out
mhm.
literally the entire book.
You
And
couldn't
I
keep
start
any of it.
I
It
think I kept
all
like 5,000 words, 10,000 words, something like that.
okay.
Like very like the character's
Yeah,
name stays the same,
yeah.
And I like rewrote the whole book. And I wrote the whole book I think in like 6 weeks. And then I
Wow.
sent it to I was unemployed and I'm deeply depressed. And when I'm deeply depressed, I write a lot.
Okay.
Um, so then I sent it to my agent thinking like every other project I've sent her, this is like our 5th project together, that she's going to like take a while to read it, send some notes, that I have to like revise it like 8 or 9 times because it usually takes us like months and months of going back and forth before we get the book to where she thinks it's ready. And she was like,
Yeah.
yeah, it's ready. I sent it out. I'm just like, what? I didn't like line edit it. I didn't, I wasn't like there. I mean, I tend to be a very clean drafter when I turn stuff in compared to most, although I think a lot of that was
Yeah.
because of time at the time.
Yeah.
And then, like, it got preempted and sold, like, right away. It sold in, like, 3 weeks, I think. Like, it was
That's
crazy, and
remarkable. And it's
yeah,
coming out next year.
no, that's the book that's my debut. That
Oh,
was
my
my
bad.
debut.
Sorry,
Yeah,
I'm trying
yeah.
to
I know, it's
they're all kinda
horrible.
I'm trying to keep the timelines clear in my
Good
head.
luck. I
Um,
can't
uh,
do it. I did a TikTok
um,
once about, like, how many books it took me to sell my debut, and then,
yeah.
like, it was, like, 6 videos long because I just kept talking, and it was like, "Oh, and then we did this, and then this happened, and then we did this, and then this contest, and then we," it's just like it was forever. Sorry, you had a question.
I joke with people all the time about how my superpower is that I can continue to talk about something 3 hours after you deeply regret politely admiring a thing I was looking at, right?
So
Like, I'm
you
just like,
too have
"No, but I'm so
ADHD.
excited about it, and I want you to be excited about it too, and did you know this crazy weird thing that I learned? Oh, speaking of that, entirely unrelated to the conversation you desperately wanna get out of, here's another thing that I learned." I go the exact same way. What that sometimes happens to me as a writer. I'm writing and I find something and I'm like, "This is fun." And I find that there is a moment where my whole body just goes, "Stop. You're so far away from the beam. Or you've just forced a character to be fundamentally dishonest to who they actually are because you needed
Interesting.
a story beat to happen." I find when that happens, I'm like, "Oh, time to stop and back up." Do you have a similar does I'm looking for validation from an author I admire. Does something like that happen? Is that right? Am I right? Am I good? Tell me tell me I'm
Okay,
good.
I will say that I had a phase where I was trying to plot more early, and
Yeah.
that would kind of happen that way, and then I realized, so 2 things. 1, I once plotted a whole book and then started to write it and realized I didn't wanna write it anymore because I knew it was gonna happen. As an
Mhm.
ADHD person, the discovery of what's gonna happen is, like,
It's not
half the
fun
reason.
anymore.
That's not fun anymore. Yeah,
Yeah.
so also, I think a lot of times, like, I've kind of, like, made my peace with the fact that I'm gonna be inefficient because I don't know what my books are about. Aviary, the book you're reading right now,
Mhm.
I will give you $1,000 if you can guess what inspired that book. It's a feminist gothic horror, right?
Yeah. I don't wouldn't even know where to begin.
90 Day Fiancé. It was an episode of 90 Day Fiancé. I'm being totally serious right now.
That's
So,
incredible.
yeah,
That is in something good finally came out of reality television. Oh my
I think
god, how long did it take? But it actually happened.
that's what I'm saying. Like, I thought it was gonna be like a particular kind of book. I thought it was gonna be about these
Yeah.
2 wives. There's like an old wife and a new wife, and like
Yeah.
none of that's in the book, right? Like none of that made it in there. And I wrote 12 versions. That book, I thought I was gonna die before I finished it. So many versions of it, and it's like a weird book. Like it's in like 3 different genres. Like people complain, either people are really excited about, or they complain a lot about the fact that it's like basically 3 different genres at the same time, right? And yeah, like
I like, to me, that's part of its appeal. I mean,
you
that's
too have ADHD, right? Like you're like, oh, I've never seen
I
these 2
might.
things smashed together. Funsies.
Um, uh, I wanna pause asking
Yeah.
you writing questions just to talk about aviary for a moment.
Okay. Yeah.
I was gonna do this anyway, but this is a great
Here's a
time to
picture.
do it.
There.
It's wonderful, my god. Would you just talk a little bit about this novel begins with a myth, and it's gorgeous,
Oh,
and
thank you.
white people don't know this myth. Like, we just don't. We don't. It did not penetrate our culture. Would you just talk about it a little bit? Because this is how I'm telling people, look, you gotta read this. This is what, like, 2 pages in, and I'm just like, well, I'm going all the way through on this. Would you just talk about it a little bit and just relate it a little bit?
It's so funny because
Mostly because I loved it so much, and I just want to hear you say it.
that is like a last minute addition to the book. Like I
Really?
I struggled so much with how to open this book. Like, and it's like, so Liar Dream of Thieves has 3 openings. Like I have
Mhm.
2 like basically like prologues that are not called prologue, and then the actual opening. This book also
Yeah.
has like a couple openings, right?
Yeah.
I just I couldn't I was this book is very much like a puzzle box where, like, the first half I'm setting all of these little pieces up, and then the second half everything just goes batshit crazy. And my agent calls it like I forget what she calls it, the Maria Dong batshit crazy train or something, because that's like how my books are structured. They kind of like,
Yeah.
it's a little bit of a slog sometimes for people because I'm setting up all these fucking pieces, and then finally when I
Yeah,
get to
yeah.
pull the cord on it.
But it's such a
So
wonderful payoff for those of us that stick with it, you know? And it's just like, I'm having these moments too where I'm like, "Oh, I wonder how that's gonna shape up." Like, it's just
oh
fun.
Everything's deliberate. It's so funny. Like I at one point, I think the editor was like, "Let's go through and find what we could cut," and like she couldn't find anything that didn't come back in the second half, right? So it was just like, well, if we cut this
Bravo.
out, then this logic doesn't make sense. I mean, I think there was like a
Yeah.
couple descriptions we trimmed, but basically, it's a long book. Like it's pretty chunky for a thriller. It's like 120, I think. For a thriller, it's like quite long.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, so what am I talking about? Yeah, so I couldn't figure out how to open the book.
Yeah.
And so I have the opening where it's like, I'm gonna tell you this story or whatever. And that was the opening for the longest time. And I just couldn't quite like I had all these pieces and then, there are all these mythology pieces that come back through the book. There's a lot of like
Yeah.
I was obsessed with Maria Tatar's work on fairy tales, like in the
Mhm.
Western sense, and
Mhm.
how like I don't know how familiar you are with this, but like there was a period of time where all like the Grimm fairy tales are all like kind of like reverse boulderized. Like they took out all of the sex and all of like the
I
gross sexy
know.
bits and they added in a
I
bunch of
know.
violence. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, so I was just like obsessed
Isn't
with
that
that.
weird how a bunch of men were terrified of sex, but really into violence?
Yeah, and they weren't supposed to be for children either. They were
Right.
anthropologists. Yeah, and then they
Yeah.
were like, but we could sell this to kids maybe? And then they did. And then that's like a super yeah. So I was obsessed with like, fairy tales and kind of what it says about feminine. And I wrote this book like between what I consider Epstein 1 and Epstein 2. So like Epstein's huge in the media
Okay.
for a while and then it just like disappears because Trump is no
Mhm.
longer president and everyone just forgot about it. And I was so mad about the fact that we were all just going to like forget about it, right? Like
Same.
I think anyone that's been through like abuse like can't really
Yeah.
forget about it. So, I'm like real deeply angry and I'm writing this book and I'm pulling together like kind of Western fairy tales, but then also Korean mythology, which also has a long difficult, in many places, anti-feminist history, right?
Mhm.
Like, the history of Korea is like it's a very complicated, dark place, and so,
Yeah.
yeah, that legend was one of the. I had this like file of all of these different legends that I was keeping. A lot of them were research that I did for that first book that died on submission,
Yeah.
and so I was kind of like weaving them into the fabric of this book and then like at the very last second like right as we're doing like the final content edits or something I just like sat down and and that opening just kind of happened like it was almost like just like I first it began at, yeah, so I think
I've
everything
had
just had to
that
kick around in there.
I've had a similar moment, like maybe once in every time I've written where it just happened to come out the way I wanted it to, and I got to the end of it, I'm like, "All right, it's time to rewrite it." "Oh,
Yeah.
it's done? Okay." Um, it is, I really love it, and I love that you opened up the door for me to pursue more learning on Korean mythology. I've gone very deep into Japanese mythology,
Oh, okay.
as it relates to, like, Oni, and I was just thinking about, like, the idea of, like, rage demons that are kind of, like, around you all the time and stuff like that, and it didn't occur to me to look into other Asian cultures, and it's fascinating to
It's
me.
weird too. I feel like a lot of Korean mythology, when you read the story, if you don't have a
Mhm.
really deep cultural understanding that's also of the time period, it doesn't make any
Yeah.
sense. It's like there's a legend, like there's a like one-off line in that book where I'm referring to this legend where like this goddess is essentially like semi-raped by the bank of a river and then like
Mhm.
someone takes a tree and like sticks it through the rapist's like earlobe. Like if you don't know what earlobes mean in the culture and what the tree represents and like what the god like it doesn't make any sense. So I think that's one reason a lot of times a lot of some of Korean mythology has caught on pretty well in the West, and it's stuff that like either has a close parallel to something Western or is easy to wrap your mind around, right? Like the Joseon Saja being the reapers, like we know what reapers are, so this idea of like you know reapers that come and pick up souls kind of makes sense. It's a little different, but like we can kind of get our head around that. Some of this stuff is just weird enough that like yeah, it's like hard to so I did it with this real balancing act all the time where I was like, is this too
Mhm.
weird for Western people to understand? Like, is it gonna drag down the narrative where they're not gonna understand what's going on and they're gonna get lost in the sauce kind of and like not be able to proceed with the story? So I'm sorry that's very random. But yeah.
I felt a disturbance in the forest while, like, 1,000 other people went, "Wait a minute, I wanna know, what's the tree and what are the earlobes?" W
Well, I
w
just
do you mind?
um I it's so the other thing about Korean mythology too is that there's a different version of every story in almost every province, and
Okay.
there's this really tight relationship between folk tale and religious text because like
Mhm.
a lot of this okay, so like Japan comes in, they try to murder all of the Koreans, they try to wipe out,
Mhm.
like, Korean culture and stuff like that. A lot of the,
Mhm.
like, older Korean religions are kind of like these, like, shamanistic religions, or they're, like, very naturalistic where it's like, we worship a tree or we worship, like, a mountain or whatever. And then you have these periods of time where, like, you have Buddhism come in, everything's, like, got, like, a lot of Buddhist mythology infused in there, then you have Confucianism, and then you have,
Mhm.
like, kind of this, like, really concerted project to stamp out Korean, like, folk and mythology and lore. And then you
Mhm.
have a period of time once Korea gets independence where the government actually is trying to, like, it's almost like the process of Mexicanization by the government, where they were trying to, like, create this, like, unique, joint cultural identity that almost didn't actually exist before. Like, if you asked a
Mhm.
Korean before all of this happened, like, they wouldn't think like, "Oh, I am Korean." They might think like, "I am from this exact part or this province or this king," you know what I mean? Like, it's this idea of, like, Korean-ness as a cultural project, right? So,
Yeah.
the answer to your question kind of depends on, like, who and a lot of oh, God, I hope I don't get canceled for this. A lot of the material and the meanings assigned to things were either, like, partially fabricated or, like,
Mhm.
extrapolated based on whatever sources they could find, because so much of our culture had been essentially wiped out wholesale. There was a period of time very recently where it was illegal to speak Korean or have a Korean name or, use Korean writing. So, like, a lot of our cultural texts and context has, like, disappeared in that, and so then, in the effort of, like, filling in that void, like, certain traditions are pushed forward. So the earlobe thing is probably actually, like, a Buddhist, thing, because, like, there's a lot of, folklore and, like, Buddhist traditions about earlobes, like, certain earlobes make you appear
Like, the bigger
wise.
they are and stuff, right? It's like,
Yeah,
is that
so
am I remembering that correctly?
yeah, and the shape of your earlobe and, like, the
Right.
size of your earlobe, and, like, the Buddha has
Yeah.
very large, like, kind of pendulous earlobes, and
Right.
earlobe size and pendulism, though, is also genetic, and so, like,
Mhm.
a lot of East Asian, cultures particularly kind of had, like, a caste system historically, and so, like, certain physical features that also corresponded to, like, people in certain castes were, like, seen
Mhm.
almost as, like, divine indication of, like, your superiority over others, right? Like,
Mhm.
there's a system, during, I think it's the Joseon Dynasty, no, maybe it's the Shilla Dynasty, where they have, like, the bone system, essentially, that, like, some people have, like, the bones of heaven essentially in them, and other people have these other, like, kinds of bones that are less, like, less important or less good, and so therefore, like, where you exist in society kind of depends on where you fall on the bone cast. And you kind of see
That's
little
wild, man.
yeah, you see little inklings of this today. Like, there was a period of time, it's kind of died down some now, but, like, in the 90s, like, blood
Mhm.
type was huge in Korea, where, like, if you had a certain blood type, you were supposed to have a certain personality, and, like, some blood types were better than other blood types, and I think that thinking is kind of like a cultural, almost like, what do you call it? Like, a artifact of, like, this caste thinking that's kind of, like, wound its way down over the centuries. Sorry. I don't think I answered your question at all.
No, so what you are just what you're I know noth all that I know about Korean history is from a couple of outings to, some museums here in Los Angeles, where I learned a little bit about the colonization and how brutal, Imperial Japan was, the silencing of Korean artists and the, like, the insistence that Korean artists stop painting in a traditional style and, like, do what their conquerors wanted to do. I see just all these echoes of, like, the colonization of America and, just,
Yeah.
like, the attempt to, like, stamp out an indigenous culture, and what I see just as an observer in all of this is the weight of Han going through all of that.
And that's, I
Like,
think,
that
one of the
just
reasons that Han is so prevalent still, right? Like,
Yeah.
you watch Korean dramas, or you watch, like, I was talking to my mom actually about my great grandfather.
Mhm.
Again, my mom is very reluctant to share information about her past, right? Including, like, my family. Like, it's my heritage, but she doesn't want to really talk a lot about it. And I came to
Mhm.
realize that a lot of that is just grief and sadness, that it's
Yeah.
difficult to talk about, right?
Yeah.
And so the story that eventually comes out, or, like, winds its way together, is that he was like a pastor, which I have a really complicated relationship with Christianity, but Korea has a very complicated relationship with Christianity, because there was a
Mhm.
period of time where we were being oppressed by the Japanese, and Korean pastors were coming in and they were saying, everyone's equal and everyone has the right to self-determination. And so Christianity caught on like wildfire in South Korea, right?
Mhm.
Because it was like this
Mhm.
message of, like, all human beings are equal, which, like, that was a difference with the ruling power structure. So he was this pastor, and so Christianity was outlawed by the Japanese, and so he was, like, secretly doing Christianity and also secretly teaching Korean, and he got caught by the Japanese, and he was killed. And then my
That's
great
your
grand
great-grandfather.
that's the story. I mean, I
Wow.
haven't, like, been able to, like, sit down and verify, like, primary sources on this, right?
Uh-huh.
So, actually, the story is that he was almost killed, and then the Japanese used to, like, apparently this is the story my mom tells, so I don't know how true this is. They would kinda bring
Mhm.
people to the verge of death, like, torturing them, and then they would drop them off so they
Oh
would die at
god.
home, and so then their numbers of people dying
Right.
in, while held were lower. So then she said that my great grandmother died, and she was trying to explain what my great grandmother died of, and she was like, "It's like a broken heart or whatever." And I was like, "Oh, are we talking about Han? Like, did I don't think my mom understands that I know these things too, you know?" So she was just like, "Yeah, she died of
Wow.
Han, right?" So it's like the idea of me who was born in Texas and like,
Mhm.
whatever, like why would I understand this feeling or, I just it's like pervasive in our cultural um like everything we talk about our culture, our books and movies, and it finds its way into the diaspora culture as well, you know. And it's grief, but it's also anger. It's the feeling of being oppressed. I was talking to a friend of mine
Mhm.
who was black, and I was like, I think black Americans really know Han, like the exact emotion of Han. I would be surprised. Yeah, I mean, I don't know, like, there's no like Han meter or whatever, but just because it also has like these overtones of being colonized, right? And so, like,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So yeah. So supposedly that's what my great grandfather died of. And I can say that another inspiration for Aviary was the Atlanta spa shootings, where like
Yeah.
a bunch of women who were working in a massage parlor were killed, and most of them were Asian,
Yeah.
and many of them were older Korean
They were
women. And
trafficked, right? Do I remember
well,
that correctly, that some of
some
them were
were,
trafficked?
yeah, and, like, the
Yeah.
definition of trafficking is not what most people think it is either, like,
Okay.
the government definition of trafficking or the definition of trafficking in the dictionary doesn't mean you actually have to be moved from, like, one location to another or, like, you have to provide sex services. It's, like it's a lot more expansive. So a lot of people are actually being trafficked in the United States or being held as slaves that the average person, if asked, would not necessarily identify that way, but,
Uh-huh.
like, that is the government understanding of what is happening. So,
Mhm.
yeah, so the thing is, one of the women that was killed had a name a lot like my mom's name, and she was roughly my mom's age, and she had a really similar story kind of to my mom's story in terms of, like, being an
My
immigrant and,
god.
yeah, and it really just I don't know, man. There are very few things I mean, because 'cause I'm 40 now, and, like, I've seen a lot of crap, and so there are very few things that really just, like, put me on my knees, but that I couldn't, like, sleep thinking about that. So, yeah, that's in the book too, I think, it is a
Yeah.
grief book. Yeah. But it's also a book about survival. So, if you're worried, I don't know if that helps. Um,
It does, actually. It really does. It's a lot. I mean, something that I really love about reading stories that are sad or stories that are scary or stories that just make me a little uncomfortable is there's always some part of it that says, "Yeah, but in this happened, and yet here's the joy. Here's how we got through it." Like the Bob Ross thing about how you have to have the darkness in order to appreciate the light, right? Um, um, I uh, uh, I spent this time. I spent a couple of years. Whenever I heard this voice in my head go, "You need to go write this," I would just sit down and write it. And I haven't
oh,
gone back and looked at any of it because a lot of it is just me responding to that odd kind of compulsion, which I I I really identify with in that part of me that's a writer. The part of me that just feels like why are we even doing anything if we're not writing a story about this? Like we need to be writing a story about this. When I became aware that no matter how hard I tried to run away from that and go get a real job, I just kept getting pulled back and I kept getting pulled back. And that was when I I didn't really celebrate it. I accepted it. Oh, I'm a capital W writer. This is like I didn't choose this, but this is what I do. Have you
it's
had a
so
moment
interesting because I don't
like
think of
that?
myself as a capital W writer.
Okay, well that
Um,
was my question.
yeah, well, because like, I mean, first of all, like, I'm probably gonna have to have a job, and second of all, if I wanna write the things that I would like to write, like, Aviary sold to a small press. There were
Yeah.
a lot of very interested big publishers in the United States that eventually chose to pass on the book because they felt like the content was just too I wanna say dark, but that's not the right word. There's just there's certain like, there's an off-scene mention of sex work in the book. It's not, like, on screen, it's not, gratuitous, it's very just kind of like the recognition that people in certain circumstances often find themselves in certain
Mhm.
circumstances, and it was just too squicky, right? Like, so many publishers were like, "Oh, this feels lurid," and it was really weird because, like, again, this was, like, before Trump's second presidency, before all of the Epstein stuff blows up again, and I'm being told, like, "This just feels too ripped from the headlines," and, like, maybe, like, later when this isn't really, like, in the and I'm like, "This is never not gonna be in that." There's never gonna be a period of time. Well,
Yeah.
maybe one day, but there hasn't been a period of time where particularly young women of color, but often, it's also young men, it's children, like, are being exploited, often
Mhm.
sexually by very rich, powerful people. So I was just kind of like, well, when? What's the criteria for when we can talk about this? Because, like, I don't know if I think about it, any, people who are assigned female at birth that can't come that in my circle that haven't at least experienced some degree of like being groped or held in a room against their will. Like, I mean, just
Yeah.
all sorts of stuff, right? So, like, that exploitation spectrum or whatever. So, yeah. So, like, it was very clear I wanted to write this book a certain way. And I knew that it wasn't going to sell probably big the way that I wanted to write it. And it didn't. It sold to a small press in England who was not afraid to do that. They were like very
Yeah.
they wanted to do it right. Like, they were very concerned about, like, had I actually checked my facts on this? Like,
Mhm.
did I have sources? Had I talked to people in these communities, et cetera, et cetera?
Mhm.
How much of this was coming from my own experience, blah, blah, blah. But, like, yeah, I couldn't find a US publisher. Well, Norton almost bought it. There was an editor at
Mhm.
Norton that was extremely interested, took it to acquisitions, and it eventually just they couldn't get the money people kind of like on board with it. Same thing happened, I think, at Source Books. There was an editor. So I just like over and over again with this book, I had like, it got to the point where, like, if Amy was like, "Hey, this editor wants to have a call," I was just like, "Fine, I will do another call," because, like, you
Oh,
have to, but
man.
also,
Yeah,
like, it's
yeah,
not going to
yeah,
go anywhere. Yeah. So,
yeah. I'm grateful that they believed in you, and I'm grateful that they trusted your audience the way you trusted your audience when you wrote this for us. I in my life in entertainment, I will never stop experiencing people who are driven kind of by fear, right? Like, I don't wanna risk losing one person in a potential audience, even if this means that I'm gonna deeply satisfy 40 people in a separate audience.
oh my
So, like,
god.
shout out to your publisher and to your agent for keeping it going, and to you for, like, refusing to give up on it. This is a great lesson for baby writers or anyone in the arts, right? If you believe in your thing, it's and other people are telling you this isn't right, this isn't right. They're not saying this is bad and you suck. They're saying this doesn't feel like we could do this, right?
Yeah.
There's somebody out there who's going to get it and go, "Oh my God, thank God, let's do this together."
Think even more than that, it's usually what they're saying is, "I don't know if we can make money off of this." Like, to be honest, quality
Yeah.
is sort of important, but not that important. I think that's like a big I learned that, and that's why I don't see myself as a capital W writer, because if I wanna write
Okay.
the things that I would like to write, a lot of times that means I'm not gonna make money, right? It's almost like a
Yeah.
surprise when I sell something and it makes money. Like,
Yeah.
when we got the call from Zandoton House about the 2-book deal, I was like, "Wait, really? Like, we're gonna make actual money? Because, like, usually we make,
Yeah.
like, little m money, like this."
Yeah, yeah.
So, I was like, "Oh,
It's a
okay."
very lowercase m. Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
familiar with that. I'm like, "You
Yes,
wanna give
like,
me how many hundreds of dollars for this? Awesome, let's go."
exactly. I was like,
Are
"Oh,
are
this is like at like a half bath to the upstairs money." You know what I mean? That's very
Yeah,
exciting
yeah,
for
of
me.
course, of course. Are you familiar with the hardcore band Minor Threat? Are you aware of them? They are and you're not because they are they're a hardcore band that I really love. They're from DC. There are a certain number of people in the audience who just perked up because there are, we're fans like that, right? They refused to do things. They refused to compromise. They refused to go be commercial. They refused to sign to a label. They are immensely influential with the people who really love them
Right.
and find them, but they didn't want to water down. They didn't want to sand off the edges. They didn't want to change who they were to be more palatable for a big audience. And they deliberately knew that they were giving up a certain amount of money, a certain amount of success, a certain amount of, well, financial success and attention and stuff, because they really wanted to make their art their way. And
Yeah.
maybe may I suggest that instead of calling you a capital W writer, may I call you a capital A artist?
Yeah, if you want.
Okay, great. Then I'm going
Yeah.
to do that.
I see myself as like someone that's just like building a deck in their backyard and the deck happens to
Yeah,
be books. Like I do not see myself as like very good at this or very fancy. And I'm always
yeah,
surprised when we sell a book. I'm like, oh, okay, I got one over on
yeah.
them. Like, so yeah. It's like I think
I've,
I mean, I especially now in the age of like AI writing books and everything, like
ugh.
we have to ask ourselves like, why are we doing this? Like, what are you trying
Yeah,
to say? Who are you speaking
yeah.
to? So yeah, I write weird books. They're very weird.
And I love you for it. I really
Oh,
do. I
thank
love
you.
that you do that. There is a little weird kid who lives inside of me who wants to know that he's not the only weirdo in the world, and who doesn't feel bad about reading stuff. And like, when in the 80s, when I came across someone who also knew this band, the Violent Femmes, I knew that I had just met someone who was weird the same way I was, and was probably a safe person to be around because they were weird the same way that I was. That was my general experience with that. I find that when I meet people who are also just a little weird, it's also another way of saying like, "Oh, wait a minute, you're a theater kid, huh?" And like, and we just sort of like go, "Oh yeah, cool," and then we go back to whatever it is we're
Yeah.
doing. You've given me so much of your time. I'm going to get to the last couple of questions that I have for you. Is there anything that you are reading or listening to right now that you want to share with the audience? Maybe inspire some new reads.
Okay, so speaking of weird writers, there's this writer Zigzag Claiborne who also goes by ZZ Claiborne, and I am
Okay,
reading the third book in their Kumalo trilogy right now, which hasn't come out yet. But they were
okay,
like, "Would you consider blurbing this?" And I was like, "Hell yeah, I will consider
love
blurbing
that.
this." So,
Yeah.
definitely recommend their stuff. They do.
Okay.
I can't even explain it. It's like I want to say it's sort of like African fantasy futurism, but also not
Cool.
because I know that those have like it has some elements of that, but then it's got like a lot of its own original stuff so yeah, like very cool stuff. Really just amazing fantasy writer. CSE Cooney, who like I feel like CSE Cooney is one of those writers where like if you're a fantasy writer and like you're weird, like kind of like you were talking about, like the right circles of people. No. Like if someone says, "Oh, I love
Yeah.
CSE Cooney," I'm like, well, we can be friends. Um,
Don't you
but
love it when you have that weird thing that you really dig and then like you just meet another person, you're like, "Oh shit.
yeah.
We just skipped over so much backstory. We could just go right to this, like
Yes.
we know that's so
We just
cool.
start
I love that.
downloading likes and interests back and forth. Yes.
Absolutely. Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, for sure.
So anything CSE Cooney writes, strongly
Okay.
recommend. I'm about to read the sequel to Saint Death's Daughter, which is actually I had the chance to meet CSE Cooney at a wedding because they officiated this wedding of my
Yeah.
friend in
Yeah.
Minneapolis like a couple weeks ago, and I was too like nervous to even talk. I was just like, So but I do recommend. Yeah, I would
I
say
feel you.
read anything by CSE
Okay.
Cooney. Yeah. I
Thank
also just
you.
read The Blueprint, which is more like literary fiction and
Uh-huh.
very dark and very sad, very griefy. But
Yeah.
I really liked it, so I do recommend it.
Okay. Thank you. I'll make sure that those are linked in the description for other folks to find. Is there like we all have something we've written that we really love that we just wished a few more people had seen or just to kind of land it in a slightly different way? What do you got? Is it aviary?
It
Well,
is. Yeah.
dude, I'm just gonna back you up on this, y'all. I can't oversell how great this is. I genuinely love it. It is it's such an incredible journey. And so God, just the way the language and the way your choice of words and the lyricism to your writing is beautiful.
Thank you.
I love it.
And I thought it would kill me, and it was inspired by an episode of 90 Day Fiancé. Don't you want to know what that would be? Like,
Yeah, 100% I do. Yeah, that's great. Would you, I'm giving you an opportunity, should you take it, to hype up someone who you think is fantastic. That just, if someone's like, "Hey, who are you into these days?" and you just can't not be excited about him. Who is
You mean
that?
like a writer or
Anybody, a
I
writer, a
mean,
designer, a
I'm really
painter, a photographer.
I'm really excited about Abdul Sayed's Senate run in Michigan, but I doubt that's like what you
Great.
meant.
That is, listen, the question is hype up someone you think is great, and that's
Yeah.
someone you think is great. Awesome.
Also,
This
S.E.
is,
Fleenor, sorry, one more person. S.E. Fleenor,
yeah, yeah.
they write, they do comics, they do like they are an A artist where they just do like some I don't even know what medium they're working in anymore, but everything they do is amazing, and I just want to hype them up.
That's
I
fantastic.
think they have like a farm now. Sorry.
Oh, that's great. The closest I have to a farm is a single tomato plant that started out as a sprout this big in it, like a volunteer in the sidewalk in front of my house. That is now, I'm not joking, almost
Mm.
6 feet across and
Ah,
like 4.5 feet tall. It has so many tomatoes on it that I've already begun telling my neighbors, just get ready. Right? Like, go get the
oh
other things to
man.
make your salsas and your pasta sauce and stuff. That's the closest I come
There is
to being on
nothing
a
as good as
farm.
like a homegrown tomato. Like, oof,
Yeah, for real.
you're a
Yeah.
lucky person.
Would you? I would love to give you an opportunity to hype yourself up.
Okay,
You want to
well,
tell me something? Want to tell me something you love about yourself?
about myself.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's so easy for us to talk about the things we love in other folks, and I feel like we never get opportunities to say, like, here's a way I'm kind of awesome.
Oh
And I'm
no.
just I'm giving you permission. You don't have to do it. I understand it can make you uncomfortable. You don't have to if you don't want to, but here's your opportunity should you take it.
Well, I'm a writer, which you know. I'm
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
programmer, which some people don't know, and also
Yeah.
again a licensed occupational therapist in the state of Michigan because I have a fallback plan. I always have to have a fallback
Mhm.
plan. I don't know.
Mhm.
Like I think I'm a very normal person. Like I think if you ran into me in the street, you would not know any of those things about me. You would just be like,
Yeah.
"Who is this lady who is walking too slowly?" Because I'm a slow
That's
walker.
great. That's great. Are you a meanderer? Do you go back and forth across the
It's the
sidewalk, or are you just kind of
ADHD,
slow
man.
in
I'm
one
like,
thing?
"Oh, look at
Yeah.
this mailbox. I wonder when this mailbox was made. Is this made out of
Oh,
steel?
yeah.
Is this, what kind of paint is it?" Like, yeah. And then,
That's
like,
great.
yeah, next thing you know, I'm like 400 pages into a treatise about Victorian doorknobs. And, it's like,
I get that. Yeah. So you've got a couple of I was going to
why
ask
should
you
I
what's
read
next, but
your
you've told
writing? Because you've talked a little bit about your writing now, and now I'm interested.
I'm mostly a blogger, so I
Okay.
write stuff
I've
that
seen
is
that.
all about here's a thing that I did, and I feel like it doesn't
But it
necessarily
sounds
have
like
much
you're
of a
writing fiction. Aren't you writing fiction?
I've been doing a lot of fiction, nothing that's currently published. I've been working on this semi-autobiographical novella for a couple of years that was universally rejected when we took it out first time around with no feedback, which was
Oh,
really frustrating because I was like, just tell me what you, capital P Publishing, feel is missing.
yeah.
I know that there's something missing, but I can't quite tell you what it is just yet. And I was
Yeah.
hoping we could kind of work it
I
out
mean,
together. And they're
novellas
like,
are a
nope, we
hard
want it to be
sell.
done.
I think maybe
Yeah,
the
they
length,
are.
because like there's only like
Yeah.
five. Well, now novellas are coming back, but for like 10 years there were like three places you could sell a novella.
Yeah. I also have the privilege of a pretty big online footprint. So if I choose to self-publish something, I can probably count on, like, at the very least being able to pay myself the SIFWA rate for what I did when
Nice. I mean,
when
honestly,
it's all done. And all I really care about is, did it get out there? Did it get read? If it happens to catch on and get popular,
read it. That's
great.
why I'm bringing this up. I'm like
Oh, you're
trying to
so
like find
kind.
out where it
Thank you.
is.
Yeah, thank you. So go at willwheaton.net. You can find
Okay.
my little virtual bookshelf. And then a couple of years ago, I did a memoir that
Okay.
actually made the New York
I
Times
feel like
list.
I feel like
It was a really big
yeah.
deal.
Yeah,
It
I
was
remember
really
this.
cool.
Oh my
Yeah.
gosh, I'm
So
talking to a New
yeah,
York Times writer.
I guess I'm sort of I guess I'm kind of a memoirist and an essayist, and I kind of model myself a little bit after like David Sedaris and Gene Shepherd
Mhm.
and Henry Rollins. So I write stuff like that, but I am learning. I'm
Yeah.
learning how to plot things out because I've always pant stuff and I've been able to do things that come out. If I'm working on something and I'm able to hold the entire picture in my head, like while I'm working through it, I can do it. Um, but I spent all of last year trying really hard to do that with something, and it was such a struggle, and I never got
Yeah.
anywhere, and I was throwing stuff away. And finally, I sat down and went, all right, I'm going to just make big mileposts I know what
Mhm.
happens, and now I'm gonna connect them, and then I was able to do it. I actually had a really good time when
It's
I
a good
got
strategy
to
because
that
it's a nice
to that
balance of,
part.
like, keeping you on track, but also letting you kinda go crazy. I do that a
Yeah.
lot. I like that one.
Um, it's that is very validating and reassuring to me. Tells me
I
that
think
I'm, you
that's
know, I'm
no.
doing something the right way. So you've got Aviary out right now,
Mhm.
and
And
you've got 2
Psychopomp,
book and you got Psychopomp, like, let's see, you got it? Yep, let's see it.
Buyer
Excellent.
Dreamer Thief,
Yep,
The Best
great.
American
Okay.
2022, and I wanna say 23, but it might be 21. It's the one with R.F. Kuang, whichever one that was. Maybe 23.
Every single one of those collections has been amazing.
They're
Like,
really good.
everyone, and I've been reading them since, gosh, since at least since this century, and maybe even a little bit before then, but I think they're incredible.
Yeah.
And, like, if I may, I hope this isn't I am from a generation where I say, "I'm so proud of you." And I mean it, and I mean it like, "Oh my god, I love this. I'm happy for you.
Yeah.
I acknowledge your achievement the way I hope to someday have my achievements acknowledged." But from younger people, I find that can be very off-putting, especially from someone who looks like me. I don't mean that in an insulting way at all. I mean, like, I'm so happy for you. I'm happy for your success and the joy that lights up your face when you talk about telling stories.
Oh,
And I'm so happy that you have so many things out there for people to experience. I just cannot oversell to the audience how great Aviary is and how much I know they will love experiencing that story.
oh, thank you.
Where can we find you online?
Okay, so I have a website, mariadong.com. Dong like ding
Uh-huh.
dong, spell it
Yep.
that way. I
Okay.
do have a newsletter on the website
Okay.
that is I'm terrible at social media. I'm signed up for everything and then I post like
Yeah.
once a year. I
Right.
also do the newsletter like once a year, so don't worry, I won't spam you. But I basically like at once a year go, hey, I have a new book, and then I send out a newsletter. So that would be my recommendation, especially because like
Okay.
I don't know, I'm trying to divest myself from social media as much as possible, generally
That's
speaking.
that's a
So
if I didn't have to do it for work, I would
I know.
1,000% not be part of that world because it's
If it wasn't for author
dysregulating and not great.
stuff no,
Yeah,
it's not,
same.
and it's yeah, no. It's
Yeah,
like I
I
could
get
be
it.
writing. Why am I
Yeah.
on TikTok again at 3 in the morning?
Yeah, totally. Well, listen, I fully expect that, you will get some volume of new subscribers to your newsletter,
Ooh,
myself included,
that's exciting.
so that we can stay caught up with you. You have an open invitation to send us anything you ever think you want to trust me with narrating. I love your voice. I really
That's
love your
so
voice. I
cool.
really love the stories you tell, and it would just be such a privilege and an honor to continue to use my voice to share your work with the people who for whatever weird reason like hearing my voice.
Thank you.
Thank you, and congratulations on all of your success. I hope that you have all the success that you want.
Thank you. You too.